Hi, I'm back. Well, I haven't put out any content for about a week since the election, and we've been on a wild ride. A lot of things are going on right now, and it's really important that we understand what it all means. Obviously, there's lots of passions. The election is being challenged, and we're going to see how this rolls out. And it's important that you have a really clean understanding about what's going on. And in talking with people, there's definitely too many of us who are going off into what I consider very, very destructive ways to understand things, way to think about these things. With me, it's always about sensibility, sensibility, sensibility. And you can't have that without good critical thinking. I had a discussion with somebody just the other day. I thought it was very interesting. I'm going to share it with you. Prior to the election, the cities like Beverly Hills boarded up the shops in their shopping area, and that happened across the country. They in the midtowns of big cities, and that was done because there was serious concern, and I think legitimate concern, that there was going to be rioting in the streets depending on how the election went. Now, when that was put out there, and the media was reporting that, there were people who had strong opinions, I did, about why they were really putting up the those the plywoods and trying to minimize any damage should there be riots in the streets. And the way the media was putting it out, it was sort of like, generic riots. And let me just say this plainly. Well, no, I want to back up a little bit. So anyway, having a discussion with this fella, and he was talking about that these measures were taking, and then the election happened, and when the election happened, then there was, it didn't go down cleanly, a few days until there was an announcement by the media as to who won. And the media declared Biden the winner. It remains to be seen, for all the reasons that you should understand. We're all getting a civics lesson about how these things work via certifications, the Electoral College, all of that. At any rate, the media declared him the winner, president-elect, and there wasn't any rioting in the streets. And that was, very noteworthy. But the fellow I was talking about really uh, took that in, and he said to me he had learned a lot that he didn't realize prior to that. And I asked him, what was that? Now, he was a staunch liberal leftist. He wanted Biden. He more than wanting Biden, he didn't want Trump, and that's the way he rolled in his politics. And so then, the media declared uh, Biden president-elect. The riots didn't happen, and he was surprised. He was surprised because he knew, this was the way he thought strongly, that the reason the plywood was being put up and the measures were being taken to try to minimize any rioting damage, was because the Trump supporters are crazy. They're alt-right. They'll get their guns and they'll get their torches and they'll burn the house down. And of course, that didn't happen. And he repeated that's the reason why those provisions were taken because of those bad Trump people. And it didn't happen. And he said to me, he said, "Well, I learned that they may be misguided, they may be fools, but they're not bad people. They didn't do that bad thing that I knew they were going to do. After all, the media was reporting what was going on with those kind of measures. Media knows so much, and gosh, he was really surprised. Maybe he got it wrong, that Trump people aren't so bad that they do riots, but the they're just misguided. But that was a relief to him, and I thought that's great. So uh, when there was another way to think about it, which I think is the more correct way to think about it, that while they may have said that the measures taken to put plywood up in all the cities was to deal with any generic kind of rioting, it was because it wasn't put up because if Biden won, it was put up because of if Trump won. Because for a year, or I mean for a long time, triggered by the George Floyd matter, we saw nothing but riots. They wanted to call them peaceful protests, and to be sure, there was people who certainly wanted to protest in a peaceful way, make their voices known. But we'd already seen so much of the rioting, and it came from those from that side. They weren't Trump supporters; they were anti-Trump. And what we saw play out was, while even though the everything hasn't been certified yet, having the media declare Biden the winner is certainly a gut punch to people who want Trump. You got half the electorate, 71 million thereabouts, who really are very enthusiastically for Trump. It can be argued that the votes against Trump weren't as enthusiastic for Biden. They were certainly maybe enthusiastic against Trump. But that's a hard thing to take. You have passion and you want, your guy to win. You want your politics to prevail. And they didn't riot, even though they got a gut punch. And I wasn't surprised by the discussion and the conclusions that this fellow was making about it. It disturbs me because critical thinking, I say, my opinion, critical thinking would lead you to understand that this was the wrong takeaway. And we're in the midst of things happening right now that are so critical, so historic, so meaningful. However, the election is finalized is maybe less important. I think it isn't. I think it's very important, but I think it's less important than our takeaway and our individual psyches, our critical thinking, our ability to act with sensibility, kindness, consideration, benefit of the doubt. All that stuff's in jeopardy right now. And as the curse goes, we're living in interesting times, and we have to be thought heroes. We have to think heroically. I don't want to get into it right now, but I mean, some of the consequences of what's being reported in the news, that's a whole nother thing. The media, I think, is so destructive. But things like, anybody who might have supported Trump or in his administration or around him, or anything remotely positive about Trump, if you're associated with that, your name is being taken down. We're making lists, and of course it's disturbing that while the other side may be calling Trump and Trump supporters fascists, and yet they can't see the hypocrisy, the irony, the craziness of saying, if you don't think like us, if you don't bend the knee, if you haven't learned your lesson, or I don't even know it. Well, I've certainly hypothesized about how it doesn't matter what lesson you learn. Sooner or later, that entity, the other side, the forces, the radical forces that are eating up the Democratic Party, sooner or later they'll be eating their own, and that's yet another aspect of this whole thing. So this is why the more of us, for our own good and for the good of our republic, for the good of our anything we care about that's important. It's important for us to keep our sensibilities, to keep our psychology and our mental health strong and firm, and we need to relate to other people, engage with other people who demonstrate that they have those characteristics, and they're coming from a strong position. So I'll leave you with what I always leave you with until I see you again. Consider what I've been talking about, and until then, best to you in all good things.